What is going on, everybody? Today I wanted to talk about a flashcard app which is known as Anki. I use this app personally to memorize over 700 kanji characters and a bunch of vocabulary. It was really powerful at helping me memorize all this information, so I figured I'd share it just in case anyone would get any value out of that. So for those that don't know, Anki uses a spaced repetition system. I talked about this a little bit in my Readwise video if you've seen that, but essentially the spaced repetition system is just a way for making sure that things get into your long-term memory by periodically reintroducing the information over time. Essentially, you gradually forget something whenever it's introduced to you the first time, but if you keep bringing that up, then eventually it'll work its way into your long-term memory. So for Anki itself, depending on whether you answer the card that it shows you correct or wrong, it will either show you that card again more or less frequently, essentially. So if you get it right, it'll space it out a bit more. If you get it wrong, it'll show it to you again in a relatively short time frame. And this makes sure that sort of the stuff that's really hard, it's introducing it to you more frequently, and then the stuff that you sort of, you know, I got this, I figured it out, then it'll wait some time before it shows you that again, just to see if maybe, you know, you've forgotten it a little bit down the road. I found this was really powerful. It made sure that all the tough stuff was getting reintroduced to me on a regular basis, and all the easy stuff, you know, eventually I would see it again and just double check to make sure that I actually still had it. So I found this was really powerful. So when I was trying to learn kanji, it was very difficult. There were so many characters, but by going through this, using this app and remembering everything, I found I was able to memorize a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. This isn't a situation where you can memorize, you know, a ton of information in zero time at all. This is definitely going to take some practice, but it could take a lot longer if you weren't using it. All right, in this video in particular, I'm going to be talking a little bit about my experience with Anki and how I use Anki to learn Japanese and my workflow. Then I'm also going to be talking about how you can get shared decks using Anki, which essentially allows you to sort of hit the ground running by using a pre-made deck and just learning from that. I'll also talk about a little bit of gotchas that I found with the synchronization of Anki. So it has both a mobile app and a desktop app that's synchronized together, but there's some issues that can happen with that. So I'm going to cover that as well. I'm going to leave some timestamps down below so you can just hop around to whatever you feel is most relevant to you. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience learning all these different kanji characters as well as all this vocabulary and how Anki tied into my workflow and how it helped me and what that all looked like. So for the kanji characters specifically, I used a book called Remembering the Kanji, and I would use the book, I would run through around 5 to 10 characters. I started off, to be honest, trying to do 10 characters a day, and that ended up being way too much. So I pared that down to only do 5 characters at a time, and that was a lot more manageable over time, and I can tell you why I would recommend a lot smaller. So I would learn however many characters at night, and in the morning I would run through my Anki flashcards. So as an example, if I started with 10, so I would review 10 at night, and then in the morning I would review those 10 again. But that ends up actually being 20 because you review both sides of the cards. So if you English to Japanese and Japanese to English, you would go both ways. So you'd end up reviewing 20 cards. But you're not only reviewing 20 cards every day. As time goes on, because it's reintroducing these cards to you, you would end up reviewing, the next day you would do, 20, or you would do 40, and then 60. And it got to the point where I was reviewing almost 100 cards every single day, and it would take roughly an hour to go through all my kanji practice. For kanji specifically, it took a very long time compared to vocabulary because doing the English to kanji translations, I would actually write down. So I would actually walk through, I had a little notebook that I had all my kanji characters in, and I would try to write everything down. And it took quite a while to write down every single symbol. So the moral of that story is start small because they add up over time. So whatever you're trying to memorize, even if it's only a couple things like 10 or whatever at the get-go, it's going to end up being a lot more over time as you introduce new stuff every single day. And in addition to all the kanji that I was learning, I was also learning grammar. So I would fit in grammar more ad hoc whenever I had a little bit of spare time. Usually more on the weekends, I would read through some of the chapters. Each chapter would have a section for vocabulary, and I would input that vocabulary into a separate deck in Anki, and I would review that essentially just whenever I had some downtime. So at the same time that you would, look at Instagram on your phone when you're bored, I would just pull up Anki and chip through my however many vocabulary words that I would have to go through that day. And it was very easy that way. It was very portable. Unlike kanji, where I was actually writing out a bunch of characters, for the vocabulary, I would sort of just say out loud, when I was going English to Japanese or Japanese to English or whatever the case is. It was a lot more portable. I would just flip through on my phone, and that was really handy so that, when you're out and about or got a couple of seconds of downtime, you can just pull up the app and go through some vocabulary that way. So I found that was really nice. And with all that out of the way, let's get into it. All right. So first thing here, I'm going to run through an example of some of the terminology that you can get used to in Anki. I'm using the desktop version here to walk you through it. So the first thing is decks. So as you can see, here's all my decks. I have a ton of cards due because I have not been keeping up on my Japanese practice because of YouTube taking up way too much of my time. But anyways, so decks are just a collection of notes. So then what are notes? If I go over here to manage note types, this will get us most of the way. So note types are here, and then as you can see, each of these is a different note type, and those note types have notes. So this is where things sort of get a little confusing, but I'll try to walk you through it. So each note type has different fields. So for the basic, if I go here to fields, it has front and back. So you can add new fields, you can delete fields, you can rename fields. This is the most basic. It's just, okay, I have a front field and a back field. So if this was English to Japanese, for instance, the front could be English, the back would be Japanese, or vice versa, however you want to organize it. And then if you actually go into the cards themselves, you can see that there's a card type to make it even more confusing. For basic, there's only one, but I'll show you an example that has two. So in this case, there's just front to back, so it's only one way. So on the front, it shows you the front, and on the back, surprise, it'll show you the back, but it'll also show you the front, for example. So this is what you see when you flip over the card. This is what you see on the front of the card. So on the front preview, you will see the front field. That is what these curly brackets around the word front is doing. It's displaying that field. So on the back, same thing. Front side is a special case where it'll show whatever is on the front, and then back, it'll show the back field with this little line here. This is just a horizontal rule that shows this line. So that's how that all shakes out for the basic type. As I said, the basic type only has one card. So for the basic and reversed, it gets a bit more complicated. So if I go back into cards, now you can see it has two cards here. So one card, which is front and back, and then the other card, which is back and front. That is what the reverse card means. So on the second card here, you can see that the front actually shows the back field. So in the example I was giving earlier where it was English and Japanese, say the front would be English and the back would be Japanese. In this case, this version of the card would have Japanese first, and then if you go into the back side, it would then show you the English version. So it's a very similar format. In this case, you can have the back field be first, and in this case, it's the front field that's displayed first. And that's the basic and reversed. So you have these, again, note types, which have various fields. The fields are the values that you're going to be putting in there. And then as you can see, it has in these brackets here, so 76 notes. So I have 76 notes that use that basic note type. And then the notes themselves are the actual, essentially, content that fills those things. So this is why I sort of wanted to walk through some of this vocabulary, because even as I'm describing this right now, it seems confusing, but hopefully this helps at least a little bit. Okay, so to reiterate here, you have decks and decks have various notes in them, and any of those notes have a note type. So if I'm going to go over here to browse, you can see all these various decks. So I'm going to go to my Genki Kanji deck, and this is the various vocabulary kanji that came up while I was going through my grammar. So on the front I had the kanji, and then on the back I had both the Japanese in this sort of syllabary, this is hiragana, and then the English, so movie. So this would be the kanji for movie, which is pronounced eiga. So that's what I would have for my front and back, and that's how I was reviewing the kanji. So this would be one note, and then those notes could have multiple cards. In this case, I was just doing kanji to English. I was not doing it the other way around. So I only have one card here, but I'll show you another example here. So if I go into cards for this was using two different versions. So you can see that in this case, it would have the front preview, which would be the kanji, and then on the back, tons of information. So this is a deck that I downloaded that had a lot of extra information on the back here. So you don't have to get this detailed, but this is just sort of the one way, and then the other way, on the front, it would just show you the word. And then when you click on the back, then it would show you the kanji for that, as well as a bunch of other extra information. All right, so that is sort of an overview of the terminology with Anki. Hopefully that helps. All right, so I'm gonna walk you through getting shared decks. So here you can see all these ones, all the Genki ones, these all I created by hand. But this top one, the kanji one, I actually downloaded this. So with Anki, you can share decks, and this makes it a lot easier to get started. Maybe you just want a bunch of vocabulary, or you have a specific book that you're using that's pretty common. Chances are there might already be a deck created for that. In my case, with the all-in-one kanji, there was. So I'm gonna show you how you can go and get those various decks and what that looks like. So if I open up Anki Web here, you can see I'm logged in, so it has all my decks here as well. But I can also click Get Shared Decks here. So if I click that, then you can see languages, and they have different sections there. So you can search by section. So I can go here into Japanese, for instance, and boom, you can see all these are decks that people have shared. They have ratings next to them, they have dates, the number of notes, whether they have audio or images, things of that nature. The ones with audio and images will be a lot bigger to download, so it'll take a little bit more space, but anyways. And chances are there's gonna be custom note types with those as well. So for instance, as a very basic and easy example, Japanese basic hiragana. So 46 notes plus audio. Chances are that's the pronunciation, and then it's rated pretty highly, so 184. So if I just go here, and then I can say download, and then I can save that anywhere. Save. And then that can actually open directly into Anki. So just by clicking that, now you can see notes found in file 46, notes added 46, and then it added all these. And then if I close that now, boom, I have a new deck, Japanese basic hiragana. All right, so with this deck here, I can edit the review options here. So here, if I click on options, this is for sort of changing my review settings. By default, all the decks go into this default option group, but you can have different options here. So you can create a new one, or you can use some other one. But this is simply, how many new cards you see a day, various settings for sort of when cards are shown to you. To be honest, I'd pretty much just leave it with the default. The only thing I edit is the new cards per day. So whether I want that to be 5 or 10 or however many cards I want to review a day, that's where I would update that here. So if I set this to 10, for instance, this is going to modify. You can see that it has your changes will affect multiple decks because multiple decks are using this default option group. So as soon as I click here, okay, you can see which ones are using the default because all of a sudden now I have 10 to review. So if I hop on over here, so now I have 10 new cards to review. So if I click here, you can select study now, and boom, we go through here. So this is the symbol for A. So then I would just say show answer and be like, oh, it's A, or it's pronounced A. So boom, and then I guess this would play something, but that's not gonna go through, but you'd get the audio here as well. So then I could say again, good or easy. So in that case, that one's easy. Boom, same thing, I, that's the letter I, and so on and so forth. So that's how the reviewing process. You can either say again would be if you got it wrong, good would be like, I got it, but it took a little bit, and then easy is like, I immediately know what that is. So then like you, I guess it's just going through all the vowels, so A-E. So we'll just cruise through. Anyways, you get the idea. So that's what reviewing looks like from that perspective. So if I go back to decks, now I've reviewed 3, so now this is just down to 7. And one of the things which I talked about a little bit is make sure and synchronize. So if you've made any changes, so I did all this in the desktop, now this sync is blue, hit sync, and it'll make sure and update everything. Now this goes back to black, and my phone, which also has Anki on it, would be updated. And that makes sure that these things don't get out of sync. So anytime you do any reviews, anytime you update any of your decks, anytime you change any custom note types, make sure and synchronize. Because I had a case where I reviewed, as I mentioned with my kanji, I was reviewing like 100 characters, and I reviewed 100, I forgot to sync it, I made some changes on the desktop, and I lost 100 reviews, and I had to do those all over again, and that was a very sad day. And that's everything I had to talk about for today, so hopefully you learned something about Anki and how you could use it to apply it to maybe your own studies if you're trying to learn a language or trying to memorize some information for a test or something of that nature. It can be a really powerful tool to have. If you're lucky, maybe you can find a shared deck online and you can just download it and get started right from the get-go. But if you don't, you might want to check out my other 2 videos. I'm going to do one on creating custom note types and another one for importing data from a CSV into Anki. So if you have to create your own decks, I would definitely recommend you go that route, and be sure to check those out. And if you did get something out of this video, it would mean a lot to me if you smash the like, hit the subscribe button down below, maybe leave a comment or share this around to someone else that you think may get some value out of it. And if you did like it, then hopefully I'll catch you next time. Peace.